date and other evidence would later confirm that the Waco tragedy was the flashpoint for the Oklahoma City bombing. Today, I turn off the VCR, but not my tormented thoughts. They continue to play repeatedly and at will inside my troubled mind. They start at the beginning. Edie and I worked together in an office a block away from the Murrah building. 2 minutes after the workday began, we heard and felt a terrifying and deafening blast. Sitting at desks 1 floor apart, we sensed our building quiver as the explosion literally shook the ground. Along with other employees, Edie and I ran outside, fearing we'd face a tremor or a large blast ignited by a natural gas leak. Once on the street, we saw smoke rising from the area of the Murrah building, where minutes earlier we had dropped off Chase and Colton at its daycare center. Occasionally in my life, I had heard about paralyzing fear that immediately overwhelms you. In those first moments, inside that nightmare come to life, I felt it. Fear engulfed us, and for a second or two, I had to force my steps that otherwise wouldn't come. Edie and I began to run down the sidewalk toward the Murrah building, and I thought we might die as falling sheets of plate glass crashed all around us. The scene was surreal, with no cars moving and people emerging from the downtown building bewildered by the blast, fear on their faces. Someone shouted at us, urging us to move to the middle of the street to avoid the falling shards of glass. When we realized the great billows of smoke were rising from the very building where the daycare center was located, I screamed, "Edie, the babies!" As we ran toward the building, it seemed that everyone else was running away from it. Despite the flurry that would soon be a hysterical mob, I somehow felt as if Edie and I were moving in slow motion. Perhaps my brain was providing the illusion of slowing time so that I could put off the stunning blow that was about to change my world forever. My hope for Chase and Colton somehow remained alive before Edie and I saw the extent of the damage to the Murrah building. When we ran to the north side of the embattled structure, our optimism waned, then sank. The entire front of the building had been torn away. It was now a 9-story abyss that looked as if it had been transplanted from war-torn Bosnia or from Berlin after World War II. The staggering sight of that much destruction, reaching that high into the sky, was beyond comprehension. I was unable to breathe, and I felt certain that I was going to faint. But if I did, I would certainly be trampled by the frantic mob struggling to get away from the wreckage. I managed to stay conscious and on my feet as interior and exterior walls continued to topple, like snowbanks inside an avalanche that sporadically collapse as temperatures rise. The blast's aftermath seemed to have a sinister mind of its own. It willfully opposed the efforts of anyone who entered the zone intending to save lives or improve the situation. My obsession to find Chase and Colton made me partially aware of the screams of mangled and bloodied people who staggered incoherently from the building. Their clothing hung in tatters. Most were covered with blood, soot, dust, and dirt. Facial features were hidden behind the gore and the grime. Their screams bespoke the universal language of appalling agony, the merciless kind that comes in an instant and inflicts indelible pain for a lifetime. My only thought was, where are my precious Chase and Colton in all of this? According to eventual media accounts, as Edie and I frantically continued to search for our babies, firemen and other rescue personnel were carrying out arms, legs, and other body parts on stretchers. Someone would eventually try to match each appendage with its owner. Other rescuers hefted giant plastic bags with blood dripping from the torn bottoms, and hands or feet horrifically protruding through the sides. A fireman reached out from a hydraulic lift to remove a man perched in an empty window. When the rescuer touched him, his torso fell apart. I saw, but couldn't mentally process, the ghastly sights of those horrific minutes. I fell into a rigid mental lockdown. I struggled to pray, but I couldn't. I found myself unable to place one word with another. I was dumbfounded. Having been reared in a Christian home, I believed in God and had accepted Him as my personal Savior as a young girl. How could this be happening to me?